Dolam Benjire Zangi Dobara Shu Zangi Jelan Zangi Janam La Janju Bardo Dani Yazoj Dangi Jeje Gebe Senam Ge Dolam Benjire Zangi Dobara Shu Zaji Begin Joji Medo Tama Rira Blinje Ninde Gemban Sangye Jindo Mide Miwayi Jogu Namda Jinlan Jebara Jo Idama Guru Ran Menda La Gamne Yanda Yaimi. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please, so we will do a short meditation, but this will be a meditation based on motivation instead of, please set your motivation to the proper bodhisattva motivation, which is to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Please think that the teaching that you are going to receive today and all the activities from then onwards, I'm going to dedicate that for the sake of all sentient beings. Every little movement that I make is for the achievement of attaining enlightenment for the sake of all the sentient beings. So every movement I make, every word I speak, every thought I think is dedicated for sentient beings to attain enlightenment, and so therefore I can help countless number of sentient beings to help them get liberated. So on this motivation, we're going to meditate 1 minute. Oh yeah, thank you. So today's topic, we will be following the other types of suffering. That basically we will be talking about the flows of samsara, within which there are the 3 upper realms, 3 higher realms, and the 3 lower realms. And we are covering the first of the 3 higher realms, which starting with the human realm. And even within the human realm, even though it's a part of the higher realms, there still a lot of suffering exist. And the most widely known types of suffering is known as the 4 rivers of suffering: the river of birth, the river of aging, the river of sickening, the river of dying. So the 4 rivers, basically birth, age, sickness, and death. And then these 4 suffering are the most horrendous type of suffering, But if you think that is the only type of suffering that exists in samsara, then you are very much wrong. And there are many other types of suffering. And today we will go into more details about other types of sufferings. So basically 5 other types of suffering that we are going to talk about today. I'm sorry, not 5 types of suffering, but 3 types of suffering we are going to talk. So basically, the 3 types of suffering is facing something that you dislike. The first is facing something that you dislike and not able to meet something that you like and desire. The fear of encountering people that you dislike, that you want to disassociate with, and being separated from people and events that you want to be associated with, that you want to be with, and then the undesirables, all the undesirables falling upon you as a heavy rainfall. So these are the type of suffering that when we talk about the other types of suffering, this is what we want. Oh yeah. So there's 4 types of suffering again. Yeah, 4. Not 5, not 3, but 4. So the first is the fear. The first is the fear of meeting hated enemies. The second is the fear of losing your loved ones. The third is the suffering of not getting what one wants. And the fourth is the suffering of encountering what one does not want. So the first 2 is actually based upon an individual or a person, like meeting up with someone you dislike, as meeting with people that you want to disassociate, like having no choice but to associate with people that you want to disassociate yourself with, tolerating yourself with people whom you want to be separated from. So that is the first one. And the second one is to being separated from people that you do not want to be separated from. So the first 2 are based, the fear of meeting hated enemies and the fear of losing your loved one is actually based on people that you like and the people you dislike. And the second 2 types of suffering are not based on people, but on objects. It may be an event, it may be a thing that is associated with a person, but it's actually not person per se. It's not based on people, but suffering that comes from the first 2 are suffering that is associated with people you like and people you dislike, and the second 2 are associated with objects or items or things that you wanted or you wanted to have or you wanted not to have. So the first 2 are based on people, on sentient beings or people, and the second 2, the last 2 are based on things, not people, objects. So birth, aging, sickening, and death is evident in all of our lives. It is not something that we encounter or that we are aware of that much, because it happens so inconspicuously, so that we are not aware that it is there. For most of us, we don't think of birth as a type of suffering, so we always celebrate the birth, by calling it a birthday. And then sickening, we think of that as a type of suffering, but it is something we are not aware of. Sickening as a sickness, as a suffering, until it comes knocking at our doors. And then aging, we never think of aging as a suffering. We think of aging as a maturation of our age, our body, which may be true to some extent, but at the same time, it is a type of suffering because it brings suffering. It brings discord in your mind. So therefore, even aging is suffering, and then not to mention death. So everyone is afraid of death, in a sense, but then we don't regard death as a type of suffering. We think of that as a destination that we reach at the end of the day. So, so there are two inconspicuous, that we are never aware of that. But the four types of suffering that we are going to cover today is the type of suffering that we usually associate as a suffering. So when we have to face people we do not like, when we have to be separated from people we very much love and like, and when things that we really prize are taken away from us, or something is forced upon us, then we writhe in agony. We really feel the suffering when a loved one is lost, when you have to face someone you dislike, when something that you really like is taken away from you, or when something that you really dislike is being forced upon you, then you really feel the suffering. So this is what we usually call suffering in our day-to-day life. When we face with these four types of suffering, then we usually see them as suffering. When you have to be with someone you really don't agree with, when you really hate that person, then you feel the pain, the troubleness, and you really feel that as a suffering. So the four types of suffering that we are going to cover today is a type of suffering that on a human level, if we can call it that, in a worldly level, in today's world, everybody can relate to this kind of suffering. From a spiritual point of view, from a spiritual perspective, these are actually grosser level of suffering. It is not one of the, that even though they are an alarming type of suffering, but there is something underlying beneath these four types of suffering that is actually more alarming. It's like an iceberg. The majority of the ice, the larger portion of the iceberg lies beneath the ocean. So similarly, even though these four types of suffering are much more evident in our day-to-day life, and that we are much aware of that, but this is more as a warning sign, and they are not seen as the root of the suffering. From a spiritual perspective, from a Dharma practitioner point of view, they are not the underlying sort of force beneath which is actually making you suffer. But anyways, this is the type of suffering that we usually associated we usually encounter in our day-to-day life. These four types of suffering. So we will talk about this today. So now I will, like usual, I will read from the script, from the text, and then make commentaries whenever it's necessary. So the fear of meeting hated enemies. First thing. So here we use the words enemy and friend. If you look at most of the Dharma text, you will see the word enemy, friend, a lot. So on one side there is the friend, and on the other side there is the enemy, and then and on one side there is the strangers. So even though we use the word enemy, it may not be that much relevant in today's time and world, because what happened is when Buddha taught the Dharma back in those days, like over 2,600 years ago, those were the time when people actually to settle a score. People fight and kill each other, and fighting with fist, fighting with swords, and that is very much evident. And then there is not something called a universal sort of law or law of the land. Most of the most of the kingdoms were ruled by kings, and the kings have their own whimsical way of ruling. So whatever falls right in their mind is the law of the land, and whatever they don't like is, so it's a very different world back then. So at those days, there are, the concept of enemy and friend is very much evident. Enemy is something that you dislike, that you wanted to get rid of, that you wanted to kill and get rid of, so to speak. In today's world, we don't have such an enemy that we really want to get rid of. We always have people that we have difficulty living with. It can be with our relatives. It can be with some of our colleagues. Even with friends, we have disagreements. We have, unlike those times when the friends and the family are not part of the enemy, and the enemies are someone outside of your family, someone outside of your village, or someone outside of your town. In today's world, it's very complicated. It becomes very sort of like intermixed. So the so-called enemy, even though it's not an enemy that you want to destroy, it comes within your own family, within your own relative, within your own colleague. You may be working in the same workspace, but you have a lot of disagreement, and you really can't stand the sight of the person whom you are working with. The same can be said of with people, with the person whom you are married with, or whom you are born of, and whom you are born to. So therefore, it's become much more complicated than just enemy as someone outsider and the friends being insider. So that sort of thing has now changed. It's become very sophisticated in today's world. So when we say enemy here, we are talking about a person that we cannot stand. So it does not mean like it does not necessarily have to be an outsider. It does not even have to be someone that you hate for your whole life. It can be even someone you love and like, but at the same time, you love a person. At the same time, their actions really make you feel repulsive, and then you want to disassociate with the kind of person, that person. So such things. So when we talk about the friends, when we talk about the enemies here in the Buddha Dharma, in the Dharma text, when the word enemy is mentioned, when the word friend is mentioned, it actually refers to someone that you approve of, you really like, you really you want to be associated with someone. That is the friend here. And someone that you really dislike, someone that you really disagree with, strongly disagree with, someone that you can't stand, someone that you want to be separated from. So these are referred as enemies. Okay, so the fear of meeting hated enemies. We could spend all our time looking after our wealth and property and mount guard over it day and night, but even that would not prevent us from eventually having to share it with our enemies. Brigands by day, burglars by night, wild dogs, wolves, and other fierce animals can all descend on us without warning. Obviously, the more wealth and property we have, the more trouble it takes to acquire it, protect it, and try to increase it. So Master Nagarjuna writes, amazing wealth, watching over it, and making it grow will wear you out. Understand that riches bring unending ruin and action. Jesu Milarepa says, in the beginning, wealth makes you happy and envied. But however much you have, it never seems enough. In the middle, Miserliness tightens its knots around you. You can't bear to spend it on offerings or charity. Your wealth attracts enemies and negative forces, and everything you have gathered gets used up by others. In the end, wealth's a demon that puts your life in danger. How frustrating to just look after wealth for your enemies. I've cast off this milestone which drags us down into samsara. I want no more of this devil's lure. Our sufferings are in direct proportion to the extent of our possessions. For instance, if you owned a horse, you would worry that it might be carried off by an enemy or stolen by a thief. You would wonder whether it had all the hay it needed, and so on. Just one horse brings plenty of trouble. If you owned a sheep, you would have one sheep's worth of trouble. If all you had was a bag of tea, you could still be sure of having a bag of tea's worth of trouble. So reflect and meditate on how important it is to live in peace, following the old adage, without wealth there are no enemies. Inspire yourself with the stories of the Buddhas of the past and uproot all your attachment to money and property. Live on what you find like the birds and devote yourself entirely to the practice of Dharma. So one might, so when we talk about these things, one might have different ideas, and one might also become a little bit skeptical. And actually, skepticism is something that is very much encouraged in the Buddha Dharma, Buddhist practices. You can be skeptical and ask questions later. One particular question might be something like, okay, so the more wealth I amass, the more worry I have. Like, so if you have one horse, you have to worry about one horse. If you have 10 horses, you have 10 horse worth of worriness. So the more wealth you amass, the more worry you have. So that means if you have the body, then you have to worry about your body. Maybe get rid of the body. Maybe get rid of your hand. So if I no longer have my hand, I will no longer have my hand pain. If I remove my hand, if I remove, let's say, my head, or if I remove something that is in my life, will I be free of worry? So you might get skeptical and ask that kind of question. So here what we have to think is that from a practical terms of view, it may or may not be appropriate. But we have to understand that this is the words of my perfect master is the training guidebook. It's a training. It's a just like the Lamrim. And actually all the Dharma books are training instructions. So when you are training, normally when you train in the military or whenever you train for something, you work extra hard. And it does not mean that you do everything that you when you train yourself for something, it does not mean that you're going to do that every day of your life. So even though it is applicable in your day-to-day life, it does not mean that you are going to do that every day. For example, when you train in the military, you work for you run for dozens of miles every day. But it does not mean that when you come out of the military, you should every day, walk for that much miles or anything like that. It's just prepping you up for unforeseen danger and unforeseen, so making you prepared. Similarly, this is a training book, so it is actually training you. It's actually preparing you for the worst. So you have to understand it from that perspective. So it does not mean whatever wealth or whatever property that you have to get rid of everything. It does not mean that. So this is something that you have to keep in mind. It is a training purpose. So for when you go to see a doctor, depending on the diagnosis of your the condition of your health, some doctors will say you have to eat more fat. For some people, they will say you have to eat less fat. So it's not the problem. The problem does not lie with the fat or the food. Fat is neither bad, neither good. It's neutral. But for people who has excess amount of fat, it is bad. For people who is lacking in body fat, that person needs to eat more fat. So it's entirely dependent upon the person. So similarly, you have to take it on an individual account what is to be followed. And that is why actually in the Lamrim it is said that all the Buddha's teachings, all the scriptures, all the text, the Buddha, all the doctrine of the Buddha, all the teachings that the Buddha spoke has to be understood as a manual of instructions. So it's an instructional manual. If you think of it that way, then it is a guidebook to every little step that you have to take on every little stage. From that perspective, it becomes relative to you. It becomes something that is, on the ground level, something that you can make a connection with, something that you can relate to. Otherwise, if you think of the Buddha's teaching as something sacred, something holy, something to be respected and revered, and to worship and to prostrate, even though it's worthy of all that, but if you think of it in such a perspective alone, then it will not be able to alleviate our sufferings. So we need to make it, get it down to the ground level, and think of all that as an instructional manual. So what we are going to read, what we are reading today, is also an instructional manual. It's a training manual, and it has to be taken in that way. Oh yeah, now let's follow up. The fear of losing loved ones, the second one. We who live in this world of samsara all feel attachment for those with whom we identify, and hostility towards others. For the sake of our families, followers, compatriots, friends, and lovers, we are prepared to undergo all sorts of sufferings. None of those with whom we have ties of kin or friendship can't live forever, and sooner or later we are bound to be separated from them. They die, or they drift off to other countries, or they are threatened by enemies and other dangers, and the suffering they undergo affects us more deeply than our own. Parents especially care very much for their children and are constantly worrying that they might be cold, hungry, or thirsty, or that they might fall ill or die. Indeed, they love their children to the point that they would rather die themselves than let them suffer. And for their sake, suffer a great deal of anguish. But although we suffer so much from this dread of being separated from the friends and relatives we love, we should think about it carefully. Can we be so sure that our dear ones are as dear as we think? For instance, our parents claim to love us as their children, but their way of loving us is misguided and has an effect that is ultimately harmful. By trying to give us wealth and property and get us married, they are tightening samsara's hold on us. So again, this is like the fat issue. From a non-spiritual perspective, actually we call that love. Mother's love, father's love, parental love, brotherly love, and all that. But from a spiritual point of view, the more love you shower upon the people whom you call family and associate as yours, your kind. The more you shower love. The thing is, for ordinary beings like us, for samsaric individuals like us, we cannot differentiate love from attachment. When we love, we feel attached. When we are attached to someone, we call that love. So it's very, 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 very difficult. Actually, people talk about emptiness and actually. Emptiness is a very difficult, profound subject, right? It is a profound subject to understand, but not a profound subject to once you see the pattern, once you understand the pattern of emptiness, you can identify it very easily everywhere. The pattern of emptiness is same everywhere, but the pattern of love, the pattern of the what we usually call the two sides, the compassion or the method side and the wisdom side. The wisdom side is difficult to understand, but once you understand it, the patterns are so easy to see. It's so easy to see. But the other side, the loving kindness, the compassion, the bodhicitta, that aspect is very difficult to kind of to distinguish, to discriminate within what is positive and what is negative, how much percentage we should have and how much percentage we should let go of. Basically, what I'm saying is love and attachment. There's a very, it always runs. There's a sort of like the boundary between love and attachment is it's gray, and then we always cross each other, and then we always what is the term? Justify. We always justify attachment with love. So when we are attached to somebody or something, we usually justify that action by calling it love, because love is something good. So that is very difficult. The distinction, to recognize, to recognize the distinction between love and attachment is very difficult, because we are so much ingrained in it. So it's very difficult. Whereas the understanding of the profundity of the Dharma, such as emptiness and impermanence and this kind of thing, selflessness, once you get a hint of it, then the pattern is all there. You will see it. You will see it very clearly. Of course, to see it first, it's difficult, but once you see it, you will see it everywhere. But loving kind love and attachment is not like that. And the same goes for hatred, or same goes for dislike. So anyway, we should think about it carefully. Can we be so sure that our dear ones are as dear as we think? For instance, our parents. Okay, this one I read already. For instance, our parents claim to love us as their children, but their way of loving us is misguided and has an effect that is ultimately harmful. By trying to give us wealth and property and get us married, they are tightening the samsara's hold on us. So this thing takes some time to settle down in our mind. So maybe after this class, you want to go over this paragraph more. We should contemplate on that over and over again. They teach us everything we need to know about how to get the better of our adversaries, how to take care of our friends, how to get rich, and all the other harmful courses of action that will just make sure that we stay inescapably trapped in the lower realms. They could not do worse than that. No. I'll just read, because we have a lot to read. As for our children, both boys and girls, in the beginning they suck the essence out of our bodies. Basically, children are born out of our essence. And then after they are born, they suck the essence out of our bodies, especially the mother's body. So in the middle, they take food out of our mouths, and in the end, they take wealth out of our hands. In return for our love, they rebel against us. To our sons, we give all the wealth that we have earned throughout our lives, without counting the cost and regardless of all the negative activities. Usually we lie to people, we cheat people, sometimes we kill people in order to sustain our dynasty. We call it, this is a very tricky thing. Maybe I would just elaborate a little bit. We usually say when people cheat and when people kind of like kill other people or maybe cheat other people for the sake of their children, We usually say, oh, I'm doing this for the family, I'm doing this for my family, I'm doing this for the future of my children. But if you look carefully, if you analyze very carefully, you will see that the reason you are doing it for your children is actually you see your children as an extension of your own ego. So the children should do everything that you want them to do. If the children does not do what you want them to do, then you feel the urge, and sometimes you actually get rid of your own children because they are not listening to you. So that actually means that you are seeing your children as an ego of your extension of your own ego. So, but you are so blinded by the ego, which actually extends itself or manifests itself as your children, that you think that you're doing it out of love. That's why I said before, love and attachment can be so much mixed up. So even though it's an extension of your ego that you are being attached towards, you think and you justify that action as an action of love. Now, we have to go through. They are still not in the least bit grateful, even if you present them with the full measure of Chinese silver. So during Pedro Rinpoche's time, Chinese silver is similar to US dollar. So in the full measure of Chinese silver, they are less grateful than any normal person would be if we had given them a pinch of tea leaves. That's true. Like if you give like $5 or $5 to somebody, someone in the street, they will be so grateful. They will pray for you, do all this. But if you give like even $50 to your own children, they will just, sometimes they will say thank you, sometimes they will not even say thank you. They will not be grateful. They think it is their due because I'm your child, and you are responsible for taking care of me. So therefore, whatever you give me, it is my own due, and I'm not grateful or anything for giving me this. I'm not saying all the children are like that, but many are. A large number of children are like that. So they just think that whatever belongs to their father automatically belongs to them. Our sisters and daughters too swallow up our fortunes without any gratitude. So this is from a little bit of a Indian. So Buddha Dharma came from India, right? So from the Indian tradition, there is when you are born with a daughter, when you have a girl, to marry off the girl, you have to give a lot of money to the bride's family, the family of the groom, because to safeguard her livelihood and all that. So you have to give them a lot of money. It's called a dowry, and it's a big issue. It's a very, very big social issue in India, and in the Indian subcontinent, you might say. So it's a very big issue. So this is what it means by when the daughter is born, they swallow up our fortune. So usually they say in India, like for a middle class family or maybe a lower working class family, if you were born with one daughter, maybe that's not too bad. But if you're born with 3 daughters, then the whole family will go bankrupt. And if you are born with 1, 2, 3, or 4 sons, then you become so rich, like overnight, you get three brides, and with the bride you get a dowry, and the family becomes rich overnight. So, and then that's why a lot of people actually kill their daughter when they are in the mother's womb. And so therefore it's illegal to do ultrasound on pregnant women in India, because a lot of people kill their children by doing so. Anyway, so this is what it means. This is what it means by swallowing up our fortunes without any gratitude when a sister or daughters are born. This is the meaning here. The more we give them, the more they want. If we have so much as a false turquoise as a counter on our rosary, they will wheedle that out of us as well. At the very best, they contribute to the prosperity of other people, because when you marry off your daughter to somebody else, you have to give a lot of money to other person. So they contribute not to you, but to other people. So, you have to understand the context here, okay? So this is in, traditionally Indian family, and as well as in Tibetan families, especially in the central Tibet, they actually followed that. They used to follow that typical Indian sort of tradition. So, so I think there's still a few who do practice that. Not to mention in India, but also in Tibet, some of them do, but not as much as they do back in those days during the Pedro Rinpoche's time. So at the very best, they contribute not to you, but to the other people's family. But should things go badly, they return home, bringing dishonor and sadness to their family. So this is again thing from an Indian context. So when the daughter is not in good terms with the new family, they were actually sent back, kicked out of the family, and then they have to return to their own parents' home. And when the daughter returns home, then there's a social stigma also here. So the women, the girls are stigmatized. So it brings shame to the family. Therefore, so the social issue here as well. So all these things, that is what Pedro Rinpoche is referring. Okay. So there are some beautiful lines observed by Milarepa on the son, on the daughter, and on the family. But I think we have already crossed our scheduled time. So we'll stop here. So the main thing here is, as I said before, you might have some uneasiness hearing what we heard today. Maybe you might have not heard of this kind of thing before. So you might think, okay, what is this text about, right? Like, is the Buddha Dharma teaching us not to love our family, not to take care of our children? What is this about? So as I said before, so the main thing is not being the food or the fat being good or bad. So it's about if you are in excessiveness of having fat, if you are in excess, if you have excessive weight, if you are suffering from the high blood pressure, or if you are suffering from diabetes or something, so if you have that kind of illnesses, then depending upon by diagnosing your illnesses, the doctor will prescribe to you certain diet and certain medication. So to some people they will say don't eat sugar. For some people who are suffering with insulin deficiency, they will tell you to eat more sugar, eat more chocolate, like that. So it depends entirely on the person. So this is normally what we do in samsaric life, is we are so much engrossed in our family life. We work so hard for the sake of our children and so on and so forth. So it's very important to check whether the love that we have, usually we use the term unconditional love when we describe the love for a mother to a child, but we have to be like honest about it ourselves and to check whether the love that we extend we shower our children is actually unconditional love, or is it actually attachment guised in the clothes, attachment disguised as love. We have to be, we have to look at it that way, because if that is the case, we have a disease within us that we have never recognized. We see that as a friend. There is a foe, an enemy disguised as a friend that we have never recognized. If that is the case, it's like a mole, a spy in the organization. So as long as there is a spy, as long as there is a hole in the boat, as long as there is a mole or spy in the organization, that organization can never thrive. That boat with a hole will eventually sink. So we have to see it through. We have to recognize, and it's very difficult. As I said before, we usually love to practice very high tantric practices and profundity of emptiness and this kind of thing, which is difficult to understand. The initial understanding is difficult, but once you get a hint out of it, then you can see the pattern everywhere and you can replicate it everywhere. But loving kindness is not like that. We usually justify our attachment as loving kindness. So therefore, it is very difficult to see. It's very, very, very much ingrained in our very livelihood. And then we take everything for granted. And when you take everything for granted, there is no more skepticism, there is no more alertness, and therefore there is no more mindfulness. You are no longer mindful, you are no longer alert, you're no longer aware. And when awareness is gone, then no matter how much you understand, your understanding of the Buddha Dharma or profundity of the emptiness or highest yoga tantric practices, if you no longer have awareness, if you no longer have alertness, if you are no longer mindful, if your mindfulness is gone, if your awareness is gone, then it's like you're like a blind driver. If you're driving blindfoldedly, if you cover your eyes and you drive, no matter how great a driver you are, you will bump into another car and you will end up in an accident. So it's important to remove that blindfold, and removing that blindfold comes from removing the shade, the cover that is actually made by our ego, that is made by our attachment in the form of love and kindness. So we have to realize that. Okay, there seems to be one question, right? I will entertain one question and then we will wrap up. Actually, we are over our time schedule.
I'll read the question. Straight to Rinpoche. Not many of us have the skills to accumulate wealth, but for those who do have the skills, example like Elon Musk, how can we continue to accumulate wealth without worrying about losing it to our enemies? Thank you, Rinpoche.
Okay, first of all, I'm not going to pretend that I am a financial expert, so I have no knowledge or background of anything about financial counseling. So I don't know how to, I'm not going to give, I don't know, I don't have any knowledge on how to accumulate great wealth, as well as how to keep the wealth without losing it to enemies. So first of all, I'm going to, say that. The second thing is, from my understanding, if you make money or acquire wealth the hard way, you usually know how to manage wealth well. And people who have amassed wealth through their intelligence, but the hard way, they usually know how to manage the wealth and how to use it wisely and well, to a certain extent, of course. So therefore, there's nothing to explain about that. But people who actually amass wealth overnight, people who become rich overnight through inheritance, through gambling maybe, through winning a lottery, these people usually end up spending all the millions within a year or 2 or 3. So if you haven't made your wealth yourself, then you do not know how to manage your wealth, and you do not know how to keep them as well. So if you made your own money, if you made your own money, then you know how to manage your money, your wealth, and therefore you will always be able to keep it safe from your enemies to a certain extent. So that is the so that is all I can say. Okay. All right. So let's we will do the dedication now. Gewan di nyurdo da lama Sangye Drogyo Ne Chowa Je Kyang Ma Lu Ba Ke Ye Sa La Gue Ba Ra Jo Chan Jo Sem Jo Jembo Ma Ye Ba Ke Jo Je Ke Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Ra Yang Kong Ne Guang Do Be Ba Ra Jo Me